Welcome to AI TV News. After years of wrangling, the White House says it has reached a deal in principle on the future of TikTok's U.S. operations, one designed to satisfy national security hawks without cutting off the app's 170 million American users. Let's break down what's in the agreement, who gets what, and what still could go wrong. First, the core concern, ownership. TikTok is controlled by the Chinese company ByteDance, and U.S. lawmakers from both parties worry that Beijing could gain access to American user data or quietly shape the app's powerful recommendation algorithm. A 2024 law tried to force the issue, giving ByteDance until January 2025 either to sell TikTok's U.S. arm or shut it down nationwide. Negotiations have been anything but straightforward. Former President Donald Trump first tried to ban the app, then pivoted during the 2024 campaign, leaning on it to reach younger voters. Since returning to the White House, he has repeatedly delayed enforcement while top officials hammered out a compromise. The outline announced this week is the product of phone calls between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, and quiet meetings in Madrid involving senior aides from both sides. So, what's in the plan? A new U.S.-based company. TikTok's American business will be spun into a separate entity with a 7-member board. 6 seats go to American citizens. ByteDance keeps just 1. Majority American ownership. A consortium led by Oracle, along with investors such as Silver Lake and Andreessen Horowitz, is expected to hold more than 80% of the new firm. ByteDance's stake drops below 20%. Data locked in the United States. All American user information will live on Oracle's cloud servers inside the country. Oracle will manage the day-to-day data infrastructure, a move Washington hopes will block any backdoor access from China. Control of the algorithm. The White House says the recommendation engine will be secured, retrained, and operated in the United States outside of ByteDance's control. However, ByteDance is still expected to own the underlying technology and license it to the U.S. company, a wrinkle that has some lawmakers asking whether the firewall will be strong enough. From the administration's perspective, the agreement ticks the big boxes: American board control, American data stewardship, and American oversight of the code that makes TikTok tick. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says she is 100% confident the deal will be signed within days, calling it a win for both security and free expression. ByteDance, for its part, says it remains committed to serving U.S. users in accordance with Chinese laws. Beijing's public response has been measured, urging Washington to provide a fair business environment for Chinese firms. Yet plenty of questions remain. Does the structure fully satisfy the 2024 divestiture law, or will Congress demand further concessions? Will regulators insist on deeper visibility into the algorithm's source code? How will the new company balance privacy promises with the data-hungry advertising model that keeps TikTok free? And, perhaps most important, can a social media platform popular for its spontaneity thrive under the watchful eye of multiple governments and corporate overseers? Those details will emerge in coming weeks as lawyers finalize contracts and lawmakers scrutinize the fine print. For now, the agreement marks a tentative truce in a tech tug-of-war that has stretched from Washington to Beijing and back. We'll keep watching to see whether the signatures land and whether this complex structure survives first contact with politics, regulators, and the app's famously outspoken user base. Thanks for listening to AI TV News. You're watching AI TV News. Today we're unpacking the Trump administration's decision to scrap the U.S. Department of Agriculture's annual Household Food Security Report, the country's gold standard gauge of hunger for nearly 30 years.
For 3 decades, under both Republican and Democratic presidents, the USDA has surveyed tens of thousands of households and published one clear number: how many Americans struggle to secure enough food. Governors, mayors, and members of Congress use that data to set benefit levels for SNAP, to fund school meal programs, and to track whether policy choices are working. But on September 20th, the administration announced that the report scheduled for release next month will be the last. After that, the survey ends. Why pull the plug now? The USDA says the report has become overly politicized, calling its methods subjective and its results misleading. Officials point to lower poverty rates, rising wages, and strong job growth as evidence that hunger must also be falling. They argue that newer, more timely and accurate data sources will take the report's place, though they haven't said what those sources are. The timing has raised eyebrows. Just 10 weeks ago, the president signed legislation that trims billions from food assistance, a move the Congressional Budget Office estimates will push roughly 2.4 million people off SNAP. Cuts to other USDA nutrition programs, ones that supply food to schools and community food banks, followed soon after. Critics wonder whether ending the hunger survey is an effort to keep the public from seeing the impact of those cuts. Here's what the most recent data show. In its 2024 release, the USDA reported that about 18 million households were food insecure at some point in 2023, an increase of 1 million from the year before. That translated to 13.5% of all U.S. households, the highest level since 2014. Anti-hunger advocates worry that without future reports, there will be no official way to judge whether those numbers climb higher. Policy analysts reject the claim that the survey is redundant. Bobby Kogan of the Center for American Progress calls it the single most important data set we have for hunger in America, and warns that canceling it could hide the effects of recent benefit reductions. Some observers go further, comparing the move to tactics used by governments that suppress unfavorable statistics. So, what does ending the report mean in practical terms? First, lawmakers will lose a trusted benchmark when writing farm bills, setting SNAP budgets, or responding to economic downturns. Second, state agencies and nonprofit food banks will have less precise information to guide resources to the areas that need them most. Finally, ordinary citizens will have a harder time understanding the true scale of hunger in their communities. Supporters of the decision insist other indicators, such as overall poverty rates, are enough. But poverty and food insecurity don't always move in lockstep. A family can earn just above the poverty line and still struggle to keep food on the table after paying rent, childcare, and medical bills. That nuance, critics say, is exactly what the USDA survey captures and what risks being lost. In short, a 3-decade-long tool for measuring hunger is about to disappear. The administration argues it's outdated and biased. Opponents fear its absence will leave policymakers and the public in the dark. As the debate continues, this year's report could be the last snapshot we have of how many Americans are going hungry, and the last chance, for now, to hold anyone accountable for changing that number. We'll keep following the story. Stay with AI TV News for updates.
A late-night comedy show has been yanked off the air. The president is hinting that networks critical of him could lose their broadcast licenses. And the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, says it's looking into the matter. All of this stems from comments Jimmy Kimmel Live host Jimmy Kimmel made about the fatal shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. The resulting storm has reignited a debate over free speech, government power, and the rules that govern American airwaves. First, what exactly is the FCC? picture it as the landlord of publicly owned spectrum. Radio and TV stations can broadcast only if they hold an FCC license, usually renewed every 8 years. In exchange, they must serve the public interest, convenience, and necessity. Because those licenses are essential to a station's survival, the FCC's power, while limited by the First Amendment, can still be immense. That power is rooted in two landmark Supreme Court cases. Red Lion Broadcasting Company versus FCC, 1969. The court upheld the now-defunct Fairness Doctrine, which required broadcasters to present contrasting views on controversial issues. The justices said that because spectrum is scarce, the public's right to diverse viewpoints outweighed a station's absolute editorial freedom. Even though the FCC repealed the Fairness Doctrine in 1987, Red Lion left a lasting principle. Broadcast licenses carry public service obligations that do not apply to newspapers or online outlets. FCC versus Pacific Foundation, 1978. This case involved George Carlin's 7 Filthy Words monologue. The court ruled that the FCC could fine a station for airing indecent content, calling broadcasting uniquely pervasive and easily accessible to children. Pacific reinforced that the government may impose some content rules on broadcasters, though the decision focused on indecency, not political speech. Fast forward to today. After Kimmel's suspension, President Trump suggested that networks delivering overwhelmingly negative coverage should have their licenses reviewed or revoked. He pointed to FCC Chair Brendan Carr, his own appointee, as the person who could make it happen. Carr has echoed that ABC's parent company, Disney, might not be meeting its public interest duties. Could the FCC actually pull a license over political commentary? Directly punishing a station for criticizing a sitting president would almost certainly be struck down as unconstitutional viewpoint discrimination. The Communications Act explicitly forbids the FCC from censoring speech, but the agency's public interest standard is elastic. Commissioners sympathetic to the White House could, in theory, argue that relentlessly one-sided coverage fails that test, essentially reviving elements of the Fairness Doctrine without calling it that. Even short of revocation, the threat alone has muscle. Stations know that license challenges are costly and time-consuming. The mere possibility can prompt executives to tone down coverage, a classic chilling effect. Free speech advocates on both the left and the right warn that once any administration weaponizes licensing, all viewpoints become vulnerable when power changes hands. The dispute also raises a bigger modern question. Does the spectrum scarcity logic from Red Lion still hold in an era of cable, satellite, and limitless internet streaming? If audiences can get news from almost anywhere, why should broadcasters have fewer First Amendment protections than digital platforms do? The courts haven't revisited that premise in decades, but the conflict now playing out could force a fresh look. For now, the standoff sits at the intersection of law, politics, and technology. The FCC must decide whether to investigate ABC's license. Broadcasters must decide how boldly to cover the story. And viewers are left watching a real-time test of whether rules from the analog age can or should be used to police modern speech. One thing is certain,
the delicate balance between the government's duty to manage the airwaves and the constitutional promise of free expression is once again on the line. The outcome could shape not just one late-night program, but the future boundaries of political speech on American television.